And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, your day is about to get better because this is a fucking awesome podcast and I think you're going to enjoy it. Let's do it. Episode 133 of the podcast. Ba-ba-ba.
Welcome to the Wandering DP podcast, where we focus on Leica photography, cinematography, and life offset. And now your host, Patrick O'Sullivan.
Okay. The intro is over. The fun begins. The shenanigans. Let the games begin. And today on the show, we have cinematographer Eric Koretz. Eric is in part responsible for this podcast existing, which we're going to talk about in a second. But he has also got a brand new movie starring Bill and Ted from their excellent adventure. I forget which one Keanu Reeves is, but he's in this movie, Siberia. You imagine doing a movie with Keanu Reeves? You look through the little eyepiece, and there he is. The dude from The Matrix, the one. Neo. What the fuck? Anyway, that's what we're looking at today. And Eric, like I said, he had a blog a long time ago. I don't know if you could call it a blog in those days. He had this website where he would post images of what he was doing, his film, his commercial stuff. He would post it on there and he would put up his little behind the scenes of the lighting and everything like that. And I, in my infancy of cinematography, was looking for ways that I could make my stuff look less shitty, and he showed the results. So I went on there, I saw the little lighting diagrams, and I probably did the worst thing you could possibly do, which is I just took exactly every single light that he had and positioned it exactly where it said to, and I got someone to pay me. And I called myself a cinematographer. They paid me, and I just stole all that information and used it for my own good. And look at me now, huh? 6 months later, here I am. And that's how you do it, ladies and gentlemen. But Eric did have that blog. I think he since, we talk about it in the episode, he since has stopped. But that is in part one of the reasons this thing exists, because I was in that position where I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Still don't. And I was able to look at some of the results he was getting, this behind the scenes stuff, and I was sort of able, with my dim-witted brain, to put two and two together and get something that resembled a finished product. So that is a little backstory that had nothing to do with this show, and you're probably waiting for the interview. If you're watching on YouTube now, there's timestamps, so you can actually skip over this part. I don't have to bore you with this big intro every single time. You can just jump right into the interview with the Image Hunter. That is Eric's handle on Instagram, and I think that used to be his blog as well. I didn't actually ask him how he chose that name, but it's almost as bad as the Wandering DP. It's not at the same level of how bad it is, but it's almost as bad. Wandering DP, I think, is as low as you can get, because you think in your mind, you think when you're in your closet and you're typing away at the keyboard and you're looking for a domain name, and you think, oh, no one will ever see this. No one will ever know that it corresponds to myself and to my life's work. And then all of a sudden, fast forward 4 years, here we are, and some mistakes you can't take back. And that's one of them. Wandering DP. Anyway, okay, so this is interesting because this sort of coincides with my story there about Eric in the beginning. Is I get messages all the time about, well, why do you get into this, Patrick? How did you get started in cinematography? And I do not have a story like anybody. Well, not that we've heard yet, and I'm not saying that they're not being honest, but I am saying I did not have the typical run to be a cinematographer. I didn't dream of this. I never wanted to be a cinematographer when I was growing up. I liked movies like every 6-year-old, but after that, I didn't really think about it that much. I didn't make movies in high school or movies in college. I picked up a camera later and discovered, wait a second, I can take knowledge that Eric's giving away for free, and I can get people to pay me for taking pictures. And it's a job where I get to go outside. I'm not stuck in a fucking office. I don't have fluorescents overhead all the time unless they're Kinos, and I can enjoy it, and you can actually make really good money, and it can be fun, and you get a comfy chair on set. I think I just said that. So that is how I got into it, and using that information from Eric's blog and from other people's stuff, this is how I sort of went down this path, and hence me being here in front of the camera now. Talking about it with these people. It's a weird sort of situation. I don't know why I brought up that story, but I think the idea being that you can use information from anywhere. Just as Eric talks about, how he learned coming up, working on the camera side of things and working in productions. And we've had so many different stories on the podcast of how people get into the industry that I think it's good to get both sides of the coin. And Eric, I think, has got a very traditional approach, and it has paid off for him. Hence, shooting a fucking movie with Neo. which is pretty awesome. And it comes out, and the trailer will be in the show notes page, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're watching this on YouTube, congratulations. You were able to find it. You were amongst the 1% of the people that listen to the show that found the YouTube. Good for you. And you'll notice that the background is the same. I teased earlier that the studio is going to be moving into an actual facility where I will not have to store my shit in the hallways of the house or in my daughter's bedroom. I can put the camera in a proper case and have it located somewhere off-site. That is happening. I grossly underestimated exactly how long that process would take, because essentially I rented out a shithole, and now I've got to turn that into something that is actually halfway decent. So that's going to take a little bit longer than expected, but it is coming. So YouTube, we've got the podcast, which is what you're watching. But also, I started a new series over there because there's so much valuable information that happens over on Patreon. Every week now, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Pacific time, we are doing the live streams. And they generally go for an hour, 45 minutes to an hour of breaking down Patreon supporters footage. They'll send in projects, and we'll look at some of the lighting choices. We'll look at some of the framing choices and talk about what they could have done differently or what they did really well. A lot of the times it's now what they've done really well because the Patreon level is getting so good. And in those live streams, there's a lot of good information in there that sometimes, it's great to be able to give it back to the supporters, but sometimes it would be nice to share with other people. So what I've done is I've created a new series on YouTube where I will be taking a few excerpts each week from the live stream and making that available in a little tutorial series. It's not a tutorial. It's just basically a show. And the show will sometimes be just me talking. Sometimes it'll be looking at people's footage. It'll be a mixed bag of different stuff. But because I am an idiot, the name of the series is called the Cinematography Series. I know. I went out on a limb and I thought to myself, where could we go that would be interesting? What part of the naming convention would work really well here? So, Cinematography Series. And we're up to episode 001 on YouTube right now. And tomorrow I'll release 002, which should be fun. So look out for those if you're not a Patreon supporter. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can just go and watch the entire live stream. As soon as we record it, or as soon as we do the live stream, it's immediately available on YouTube. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you get access to all of the back catalog of exclusive content, all that stuff that I normally fluff on about in order to get you to support the show. I'm going to skip that today because we got other fish to fry. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, you know who the fuck it is. Music Bed. And they're bringing the heat today. Music Bed is doing some things. And the first thing that they're doing is they are hosting a film and music conference in 2018. It's happening the 28th and the 29th in Fort Worth, Texas, the Lone Star State where shit gets crazy real fast. And that's probably going to happen at this conference, right? I don't want to tease anything, but shit is going to get crazy. And it's in Fort Worth. We just said that, Patrick. And the Film and Music Conference brings top creatives and filmmakers together for 2 days of inspiration, education, new connections, and copious drinking. The tickets are $599, but you can get 10% off with the code WanderingDP. You can find more information at filmandmusic.com. We've talked about the level of speakers that are going to be there. We've talked about why you would go to this conference if you are a listener of the show, or if you're someone who's just starting out in their career, or if you're more established. If you're further down the line, it's making connections is such an important part of this business that I think you're going to get a lot out of something like this. And it is different than NAB. It's different than Cine Gear because there's, in all those situations, there's so much stuff to see and it's a big crowd and you're amongst the unwashed masses. This is really a focused environment. It's 2 days. It's in a very cool location. The Music Bed, I know from last year and from getting feedback and talking to people that were there that it was a really fantastic experience and it was well curated. And this year with the speakers, it looks to be identical. It looks like they've raised the bar. Speaking at this event, we've got Robert Legato, who's an Oscar-winning VFX supervisor. He reinvented the film industry when he introduced virtual cinematography and applied it to legendary films like Titanic, Apollo 13, Hugo Boss, The Jungle Book, and many, many more. Through his work, he's collaborated with some of the most well-respected names in the film industry: Martin Scorsese, Jimmy Cameron, Ronnie Howe, and Robert Zemeckis. Also, Franklin Leonard, who's the founder of The Blacklist. It's a yearly publication highlighting Hollywood's most popular unproduced screenplays. If you're not familiar with The Blacklist, you have not been in the industry very long. Blacklist scripts have earned 250 Academy Award nominations and 50 wins. 50-0, like the Floyd Money Mayweather of the Oscars. Franklin has worked in development at Universal Pictures in the production companies of Will Smith, Sidney Pollack, Anthony Schmacher, Leonardo DiCaprio, and John Goldwyn. Good luck if you recognize that middle name. I have no idea what that says. Also there, the likes of individuals such as Rain Allen Miller, a visionary director and writer with a unique storytelling style. She is currently represented at Some Such, a production company featuring some of the top directors in the industry. Rain has worked with leading creative agencies such as... How long can I possibly... I'm going to do that gag until the copy changes or until Music Bed says, that joke is so shitty, we're pulling our sponsorship, which is probably likely to happen. Exposure, Wyden and Kennedy. She developed her award-winning career at Mother London, generating work for clients including Save the Children, Money Supermarket, BAFTA, and IKEA. So those are just a little tease of the kind of talent that are going to be there at the conference. They're going to be giving talks. You're going to be chatting to people in between the talks going, hey, I need a job. So do you. Let's do something cool. And you'll probably make some Vimeo staff pick, and I'll be in the credits as associate producer. That's part of the deal. Okay, so that's happening. The Film and Music Conference, September 28th and 29th. Wandering DP is the code to save 10%. Okay, should we get into the hotline? Because last week I completely shat the bed and forgot about it. So this week, I'm posed not to do that. We're going to hear from some people. Let's do it. Let's get on the hotline. Put the old headphones on. And when you're ready.
Hey, Patrick. Thanks for taking my call. My name is Michael. I'm an aspiring cinematographer in Orlando, Florida, 21 years old. And I have a question regarding...
21 years old from Orlando, Florida. A state where shit gets crazy real fast. 21. What was I doing at 21? I was probably scratching my ass in New Zealand, thinking that I was going to be a professional rugby player for the rest of my life. Just had traps coming out from my ears, just completely fucking yoked out of my mind. Didn't know my ass from my face. That was what I was doing. So good on you, Michael, for aspiring to something at 21. That's a start. I did not have that level of togetherness.
Camera movement. So I've listened to a lot of your podcast breakdowns on lighting and natural light.
So you're an expert by now. If you've heard a lot of the podcast, surely you know what you're doing. Okay.
Setting up scenes with negative fill and all that. But, specifically regarding camera movement, I haven't heard you speak too much about it. And so I was curious on how you assess how to move the camera on certain commercials or certain, narrative pieces or music videos or what have you. How do you decide how to move the camera and what tools are necessary?
Okay, this is a good question. We haven't talked a lot about it only because it is difficult in the podcast medium to talk about camera movement, also with the show notes page and what I can show from these projects without getting in serious trouble from a lot of people and jeopardizing my entire career is, you can't really have the clips on there, and I can't really talk about the movement, but it is an important situation. It's an important conversation that you have with the director and your key grip and everyone involved in how you're going to make something happen. But a lot of that happens in conversation with the director that's rather hard to show in a show notes page, but I can chat about it here. Really, this is one of those things where, lighting can sometimes be subjective. Lighting, you can sort of say, this is how we're going to do it, and you paint some picture of an idea, but camera movement is so pivotal to the story, especially in a commercial where you only have a limited amount of time to sell something. That camera movement has to be very considered. And that is a long conversation beforehand saying, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? If it is handheld, we know I've talked about the Easy Rig figure eight before with the little float where you can pick up moments, and you enter a shot on the downward slope of the figure eight, and then you exit the shot on the next loop of the figure eight. And we've had those little conversations about camera movement from a handheld perspective and what works in commercials and why it works because of that movement and creating a sense of flowing and a little bit of creepiness. For some reason, creepiness sells in camera movement. It's just that little bit of float that is important. But moving the camera from point A to point B and how we're going to get there and how we're going to do it. Yes, I am certainly involved in those conversations with the director and the key grip in saying, okay, how are we going to make this happen? Or how are we going to, is this a Steadicam job? Is it a Movi job? Those conversations happen, but it is so project specific that here I think it's sometimes it's better to focus on things that you can take out and easily replicate. The camera movement side of things, I'll give you an example. Something like the UWA commercial from a few years ago, that we were very in tune with what we needed to go from cut to cut and how we were going to move the camera. We only had one option the entire shoot, which was to shoot it on a gimbal, and so we were concerned about making sure that we had enough following shots to slow things down and enough side-to-side shots that we had to speed things up. But the actual device that we were going to use was already predicated on what we could bring on the planes multiple times because we were flying in and out of so many different countries. If we're talking about a spot where we have access to, we have access to a techno crane, we've got access to a dolly, we've got access to a Steadicam person, the choices in between those, I'm someone that likes a lot of control, and there is also a giant lack of, at least that I've found, Steadicam people that I know in Australia that are capable of producing results where you're like, wow. I talked about it, I think it was last week. I talked about, one of the benefits of having camera operators is that, you can light something, but you're always going to film it from the angle that you are going to film something from. I have a certain eye. I like things a certain way. I'm always going to frame it up like this. Whereas a camera operator, they have their own interpretation of what looks good. You're going to go out there and you're going to send them out with ideas of, hey, do this and be on this lens. But they're going to come back to you with something that you wouldn't have done. They may be a foot over to the right or a foot left and or up or down or something like that. Steadicam is such a huge, there's so much input that they have in the movement and the timing and the framing that you can give little notes, but really it is them. They are making those micro adjustments that make the biggest difference. So for Steadicam people, I find it hard to, it's very hard to get good people in the area that I am. I know that a lot of them exist. I see a bunch of them, and I know from other cinematographers talking to them that there are some very, very skilled people out there. But it wouldn't be my first go. I'd want to have more control. And so it comes down to, do we want it to be fast-paced? Do we want it to be slow-paced? Do we want a little bit of float? Do we want a little bit of movement? Or do we want that Fincher style of dolly where the axis never changes? We're only going one way or the other. Do we want that Andre Stringer sort of always moving forward? He's got some really good examples. Andre Stringer's a director. And I see his stuff in treatments all the time because he has got a few different commercials where the camera is just always creeping forwards. And it's creeping forwards just enough to be like, oh, the viewer starts to anticipate, oh, what's the next shot? What's going to happen now? Where do we go from here? And that kind of stuff is great. But those conversations and it's just chatting and figuring out what's the goal here. Do we always want to keep moving forward because we got something that's rather boring and we just need to hold people's attention? Do we want to, commercials are so different from narrative in the time that you have to explain an idea that the movements can sometimes be a bit more forced and you can be a bit more deliberate and heavy-handed rather than in narrative stuff. It starts to, the wowness of the camera move starts to take over. And a lot of the times in commercials, you're trying to create wowness because you're in a fucking suburban neighborhood and it's boring as batshit and you're just like, man, how can we spice this up a little bit? There are those choices as well. So that's probably why I don't talk about it much. But I would certainly lean to, I'm a person who would rather have more control than less control or turning it over to someone. But who knows, that may change in the future.
On a given project. And so I'd love to hear how you break that down. Thanks again.
Well, thank you for calling in, Michael. It was a pleasure. And that's question number one. Let's hear the next one.
Oh, hello there, Patrick. It's
a familiar voice to the podcast. And from the sounds of it, this sounds like the first time anyone has ever called into the hotline in a bathtub or underwater. So congratulations, Wonder Boy. If you're a regular listener to the show, you'll recognize that voice. That is the Wonder Boy. He was actually on the podcast for a few episodes and then spent some time on the live stream helping out until he went away on a safari, which I think we're going to hear right now.
Remember me? Yeah. I just thought I'd touch base, let you know what I'm doing. I'm on a cinematographical safari at the moment.
Well, that's great. You're making up words. And not unlike this call, no one has wasted more time on this podcast than the Wonder Boy.
UK countryside, West Africa, the usual spots. Currently trapped in by the rain and by a chimpanzee family that I've been tracking, but,
It definitely doesn't sound like rain. It sounds like in the background there's dripping tap water.
Hopefully I'll get out of here soon and get back to Australia. I've been loving the show when I get reception. Lots of people from the UK on there. Very nice. Keep it up. Just thought I'd say hello. Not that you give a shit.
I definitely don't, and I don't think any of the listeners do either. I think we've wasted. That was a good 30 seconds down the drain. But thank you very much, Wonder Boy, for the call.
Just thought I'd say hello, and looking forward to get back into it when I can.
Well, we probably won't have you back on, but who knows? If the people speak, if you guys are interested in having the Wonder Boy back on, let me know. And leave it in the comments. I can't imagine that you would be. Not to be mean to the Wonder Boy, but I think his time has come and gone. Can we agree on that, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, that is it for the hotline. We waste no more time only because this episode has the potential to be a enormous blowout. So that is going to do it for the hotline. Let's get into this week's featured interview. This is Eric Koretz. We're going to be talking Siberia. We're going to be talking about his background. And rather than telling you what we're going to be talking about, why don't we just play the thing? Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I am. I'm from Boston originally, but I moved to LA right after undergrad and then came out here.
Did you do undergrad for film?
No, I actually did undergrad for graphic design.
Yeah.
I had a design company in college, like while I was in school, and we did websites for actually some big companies like Giant Bicycles. So I had a full side job, and I was going to school for graphic design. And then when I came out to LA, I was doing graphic design as well, but I was doing sort of these hybrid projects. I would animate over video, and I would sort of shoot and direct and do all the things with my own stuff. And then I realized I hated graphic design and just wanted to go into film.
One day, like that.
Just like that.
Yeah.
So shut everything down, and then just started PAing because PAing was awesome, I guess.
Yeah.
And really started learning the business and like what a film set was from that, because I had no idea. I was just doing projects on my own before.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've had a lot of people on the show, especially directors that have graphic design background, because you can sort of see how the correlation between coming up with something that looks good and treatments and winning people's emotions. Have you found that it's benefited you in the way that you approach the work?
I think so. I think design, first of all, I mean, it's different for everyone, of course, but I think having a design background allows you to sort of, like you were talking about, sort of dissect the page, translates very well to dissecting the films, the film play and the film screen, and seeing what works.
Yeah.
And I think that was great for me because I ended up going to AFI afterwards. So I didn't have as much film experience, but I knew how to line up a shot, because I did photography and I had the design background. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the basis you need for film school. It really helps.
And what was that decision like when it came time to decide, okay, I want to go to AFI? Why that move?
So I was kind of naive. I wasn't a cinematographer. I actually had no idea really what a cinematographer was. I'd be on set, and my background really was just PAing and shooting my own stuff. And so I never really crewed or anything like that. And I was like, you know what? I want to go to AFI for cinematography so I can learn the camera better. Not realizing that everyone else in school had maybe, at least 4 or 5 years experience, if not more. Yeah. So somehow with a weird portfolio, they let me in, and it was kind of like, we're going to let you in, but you're weird,
You're far behind the others.
So, I had photography and I had some of my own stuff, and but I got in, and then even while I was there, I was like, I want to get out. I'm going to shoot and direct and do my own stuff. And then, I think it was halfway through, I realized, you know what? I actually really love cinematography. That's what I want to do. And just fell in love with it that way.
Yeah.
which was unusual.
And then what was the process like afterwards? So you get out of school and you're like, fuck, now what do I do? Or did you make enough contacts there to say?
After school, I got lucky. A friend of mine was directing a documentary on Wikipedia. So I ended up traveling the world, shooting these interviews for this Wikipedia documentary. It's not visual; it's just talking head interviews. But it really got me going to sort of just travel and shoot and just get paid to shoot. And in the beginning, when I'd come back, I'd have to do a little bit of graphic design work to pay the bills. But I decided early on not to crew because I wanted to either DP or I don't want to say it's falling into the crewing trap, but I wanted to only DP. And if I was going to have to make money, otherwise it was going to be through design, which luckily I didn't have to do too much. But that's how I did it.
Yeah, and then the documentary, you take that, and that's something that you can show people and say, "Listen, this is what I'm capable of," and you go more that angle, or did you say, "Fuck, I don't want to do any more documentaries"?
No, I ended up doing a lot of documentaries actually, and it was sort of it was when the 5D had just come out. That documentary was before the 5D, and the 5D came out, and I was doing this documentary called. We were about to do this documentary called Dragon Slayer, which ended up winning South by Southwest and for best cinematography and for best documentary. And I, when we were originally deciding what camera to use, we were like, we could use the 5D or we could use the Sony. I think it was the EX3 with the adapter. Or was it the lettuce adapter?
Yeah.
And that was the decision at the time. It was like, do we do the 5D, which is new, or this? Exactly. And then so it ended up being, it was supposed to be a 2-month shoot over the summer, and ended up going for a whole year. Jesus. And it was about this skateboarder. It's sort of about lost American youth during the foreclosure crisis. Yeah. And he's a skateboarder named Screech, and we ended up following him all over the world. He would do, competitions in Sweden and, Portland and all over. Yeah. And so we just followed him, and I just, was filming the whole time with the 5D. Yeah. And so that was sort of my first, I did some, as that was happening, I think I started doing these sort of travel commercials, like lifestyle commercials with the 5D. Yeah. I kind of started getting known for the 5D stuff because I was blogging about it at the same time. Yeah. And so the blogging sort of helped, speedball or speedroll or, whatever the term is for getting more work. Yeah.
Things began to ramp up.
Yeah. And so I started getting more commercials too. And then, after, then I signed to an agency, UTA, right after the documentary. Yeah. And just started getting more commercial work.
Yeah. And then when you signed, so the Dragon Slayer wins South by Southwest. Yeah. Or for the best cinematography. Yeah. Is that something then when UTA calls you and says, listen, we love the stuff that you're doing, and this is what you should be doing more of? Or do you go to them and you're like, no, I want to do more commercials, but I did that one time. Right. And then do you sit down and have that conversation with them when you join up?
Yeah. Well, it was a while ago. I don't think there was a conversation of what I wanted to be doing. I think it was more just like, let's just get some work. Yeah. And I ended up, I wanted to go into movies because that's really what I got into it for. Yeah. And I just remember I actually met a lot of directors I'm still friends with today, interviewing for films before I had done a film movie through ETA. One of which we could jump ahead a little bit. We prepped for 2 months to shoot a film. It was a $5 million picture, I think, with Christopher Walken and Anthony Mackie and Megan Fox, and then she dropped out and someone else came along. Anyway, it got canceled the day before we were supposed to start shooting. We had prepped everything, and I came back and everyone was crying. Oh no! And that was my first experience with a film. It was like, okay, we're done. We're not going to shoot this movie after all. Jesus. Sort of dragged on for a couple of weeks. Like, we might shoot it, and then we never shot it. And we still haven't shot it. But I'm still friends with that director today. So
still waiting on the project.
And we're about to do another movie in a couple months. So
yeah.
persistence.
It'll come full
it comes
circle.
around. Yeah.
You just never know until that last day. That's
Exactly.
that's the word of it.
Yeah.
That's funny. So you start down that path where you're at UTA and you're interviewing for movies and stuff like that. And in the meantime, how is the work coming in? Is it coming in, once you sign up, is it coming in through them, or is it coming in still through personal
for commercials, when I was there, it all sort of came in through my own context. Because I had been doing a lot of smaller commercials, and I ended up leaving to go to a different agency for commercials because they, they're big and they didn't know how to sort of help the bottom of the new people for commercial wise. So I ended up going to Partos, which really they started getting me a lot of commercials. Yeah. And I started really building my commercial portfolio from there. Yeah.
And the whole time, are you thinking in the back of your mind, okay, I want to do movies. Right. So I need to go down. It would be beneficial for me to go down this path with the commercials and shoot it like this, or what's the?
I think at the time, once the commercials really started rolling, I was like, I'm going to do commercials for a while, and if a movie comes along that I want to do, I'll do it. Yeah. So it helps. It helps if you're doing commercials. It helps you wait and pick the movie that you want to do, which is what happened. Yeah. And then I waited for a bit. I was still with UTA for movies, and I ended up doing a movie called Comet with Sam Esmail, who's now the creator of Mr. Robot. Yep. And that was my first film.
Yeah. And was it one of those things where, we've talked to a bunch of people where it's hard to get that first one because you haven't done one? Was that the situation, or were you able to sell, I've done this many commercials and done the shorts and all that stuff? Did you have that resistance?
Yeah. Well, I think it was before Comet, I had done actually a small TV show for AMC called The Trivial Pursuits of Arthur Banks, with a director named Peter Glanz, and it was starring Jeffrey Tambor and Adam Goldberg. And it was sort of like their first comedy web series that ended up being on TV as well. Yeah. And so I had that as my narrative sort of piece, and also my thesis for AFI. What was the question? I totally forgot.
No, it was about getting resistance when you go in to sign for the movie. Like when you go in to like pitch and say, well, this is, or even for the director, like, okay, I want Eric to shoot the movie. Right. And then for him or her to be able to sell you on. Right. Sort of the resistance comes from people like, well, fuck, he's never done that.
Right. So because it was a lower budget film, and because I had that as a background, there wasn't as much resistance. Yeah. And the aesthetic of that was very similar to Comet in similar to Mr. Robot, and that it was a lot of high headroom and a lot of the Trivial Pursuit piece that I did. So I think Sam immediately gravitated towards that, and then that's why they brought me on to do the film.
Yeah, and then did you find that?
And Dragon Slayer helped too, because Dragon Slayer wasn't a normal documentary. It was a lot of long lens cinematic, trying. Good lighting and that sort of thing. It still had its doc moments, but like it was a cinematic documentary, so it wasn't like normal docs.
Yeah, so something under your belt that you've already delivered on, that they were they're happy with the look, and that you could, because a lot of the times it's not even about how stuff looks, and when it comes down to that level, it gets just like someone is sitting there at the desk going, has he done a car commercial with a red car or the blue car?
I get that now, where it's like. He has a bar scene, but the bar scene wasn't lit with blue light. Does he have any with like blue light? I'm like, well, I could just press a button.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially now. You just DMX you up here.
But a lot of the early commercials, actually, I was getting based off the look of Dragon Slayer because I think it was pretty timely in how it worked. So. Yeah,
that's one of the. That's another thing is falling into those traps and trying to identify, is this really something that I want to do? Right. In that style or in that vein. And the same thing works for movies. It's like, did you do that first movie and you were like, well, this is really where the fun is, or did you do it and be like, fuck, I love commercials because they go so quick and I get to do so many different things. What was your initial experience, and what were you expecting versus what you got?
Well, ironically, that was, I had more trouble after my first film because the trailer that they had put out made it feel like a romantic comedy, when the movie Comet was not. It wasn't a romantic comedy. It was a weird, twisted, dark love story. It had some funny moments, but it was a dark film. So actually, I found out a little too late that that's what the kind of movies I was getting pitched for, and what I was the response would be like, well, he only does dark He only does romantic comedies, but it was the only film I've done. And so I ended up cutting my own trailer to the Comet because I had that background of doing all my own stuff.
Yeah.
And I sort of made it more, pushed the trailer to darker and more to what it was.
Yeah.
And that actually ended up helping and getting more, more stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now, fast forward to now, and you've done features and countless commercials and all the other stuff that you've done.
Yeah.
What are you looking for when a feature comes in now? Like, how is it exciting? Because it is.
Right.
I mean, it's huge. You're talking about a huge time commitment.
Yeah.
That you're taking out of your day, especially, and then trying to get back into the commercial workflow. Like, it's quite tricky how that works. What is your deciding factor now?
Yeah. One, I look at the people involved and do I like their work, and do I think they'll push for a good end piece.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
And you're talking about director or producer
and
or everybody?
producers, because ultimately, if it doesn't have good producers with it, I've had experiences with films where it just, a good movie doesn't go anywhere because it just gets pushed in the wrong direction or it doesn't get out when it should. So I try and see if there's good people involved. And then does the script move me? I'm not really looking in terms of genres because I try to be open to a script when I first read it.
Yeah.
I just want something that can move. That either it's move me in some way, either through the story or through the visuals or through. I want to do pieces that move, that can change your mind or your point of view or also stylistic too. Like I love dark films.
Yeah.
I grew up watching dark films. I love dark films. So. That's what I love doing. So.
Yeah. And in the process, for someone that doesn't know how it works, like how does the script get sent to you? Do you get contacted by a director that you've worked with before? Like how does it actually come to you now that you have all this experience, have all these contacts? Do you just get sent random scripts and your agent's like, hey, check this out? Yeah. We'll put you up for it, or how does it work now?
All different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get scripts sent to me. Sometimes my agent will say, well, I'm going to put you up for this film. Let me know what you think. Sometimes it's random submissions through my agent that say we like his past work. Will you read this?
Yeah.
So it's always different. But I'm happy to read anything, and just because you never know where it's going to come from, regardless of budget.
Yeah. And then so say your agent says this is to check out this script and you end up really liking it.
Yeah.
How does the process work from there? Do you sort of come up with your own, because if the director, if they don't know who you are,
right,
then you have to suddenly and you want the job.
Right.
Do you make up like a document to show, or do you sit down with them?
So it depends on what stage of the process is, but some a lot of times you have to have a meeting set up, and if you don't, like, maybe I can reach out to the director or the producer and say, hey, I love this, like, here's what I think about it.
Yeah.
And then can we meet? But usually it's the agent that'll set up the meeting.
Yeah.
And it depends on the film. I don't like to go into it with a full lookbook saying this is what I think the movie should be like, because it's really the director's film, and you want to push their vision and give your ideas, but like you don't want to be didactic, and I personally don't like being didactic. Like, this is the look that the film should be.
Yeah.
So I like to talk to them first during the meeting, and then if we have a sort of a good flow, I've already put together sort of a small lookbook of what I think, some images that might be influential, and maybe like halfway through the meeting I'll start showing them images and talking about ideas. And then talking about movie influences, because I think the most important thing when working with directors, to me, is other films that influence this film, because you don't come from a vacuum. There's other films before that have can help shape and influence your movie.
Yeah.
Like Tarantino borrows from everyone. So
yeah,
it helps to have a good movie background that you can reference other films, and the director knows these films, or you can bring them to them and say, this scene in this film reminds me totally of this scene. Like, what can we take from this to push towards that scene?
Yeah.
And I think that's the best language. I think as a DP, you really have to be incredibly well versed in movie history to be able to bring that to a current film. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And is that something, so after, let's say you get the job and okay, you're signed on and all the boxes are ticked in, you go into the pre-production process.
Yeah.
Are you someone that will then take that movie knowledge and use those, like, are you hunting for specific stills that correspond to the things, and then you do that?
Yeah. So because of my design background, I do a really extensive lookbook that it ends up being 70 to 90 pages, and we basically break it down by scene, by character. The character breakdown by 3 acts, what the stages of that character looks like in reference to film or photography. I also do a lot of photography references.
Yeah.
And then as you're going through, like, I try and be specific locations. So, like, if this location of film, we want it to look this way in Act 1, this way in Act 2, this way in Act 3, we'll bring in references from each of those acts, or maybe not acts, maybe just what the location we want it to look like.
Yeah. And are you doing that for your own reference?
So it's for both. I think it's a great way to work with a director and have them do the work with them. So, like, you sit down, you watch movies, you take stills from the movies, and you put it into a place where, like, you remember it, and you be like, oh, okay. And then so it starts off as an exercise, and then it ends up being something that you can build to show to other crew members, like, so that everyone knows what your vision is.
Yeah.
And some films. I haven't worked on film like that yet, but, like, documentaries or something like that where you're more instinctual and you just want to fly around, that can work too. But for me, I prefer to be over-prepared, and then when you get into a situation, you can you have that as your background.
So it's not like you have the book on set on the day that you're in the location and you're, like, looking through it like, okay, what am I doing here?
Right.
I'm doing blue. It's just a way to remind yourself.
Right.
Of where the ideas have come from.
Usually what I'll do is I'll never have it on set, but, the day before, if we're going to go into a new location, I'll look over the references. I'll go over with my gaffer and key grip and the director, talk about the look of the location. But I never bring it into set and be like, well, this is blue. But what we do, however, on some films, and I do this with director Matt Ross, who I did a movie called Frank and Lola with, and then this last movie called Siberia with Keanu Reeves that's coming out in July.
Yep.
We basically go into each location with the camera, and we pre-shoot everything if we have the locations. So,
like the camera you're going to shoot with, or just a camera?
So a camera. Okay. So a long time ago, I had a Red that I could bring with me. We shot the movie in Alexa, but and with a Canon zoom lens.
Yeah.
That way we could sort of frame with the depth of field and the framing, everything we wanted, and and it's great for directors because they can sort of do this without pressure and sort of pre-visualize things.
Yeah.
And it was just me, the director, some stand-ins, and all the directors I've done that with have found it pretty invaluable. We did it in Comet.
Yeah.
So, like, Comet is actually to a T. Every shot was the same in when we did the lookbook, not the lookbook, sorry, the
photo boards.
The photo boards, yeah. It's almost exactly the same as the film.
Yeah, and I imagine it would make a huge difference in the speed on the day, even if you weren't going to use just those frames. Just everyone's seeing, okay, this is safe. Yes. This is not safe.
And it goes back to what I said, where you have this backbone to work off of, and then you can do whatever you want when you get on set if you feel the inspiration to. But it's when things are flying around and you're only on a day because you can't have overtime, and you're like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do? You have that to go back to, and you're like, well, at least we have this.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And then do you take, say you've got your book and you're prepped and you're ready to go for the first time in that location.
Yeah.
Are you someone that will sit there and draw up lighting diagrams of exactly where everything's going to go, or is it more on the tech scout, you're talking with the heads of department saying this is the general idea, or are you like, no, I want this specific lamp at this specific spot with this specific gel,
right?
Like, how oriented do you get?
I try, I've always wanted to be the person that could draw a lighting diagram and be like, this is where everything's gonna go. But I find that even though I love that the sort of the apps and the technology to draw that out, and I always find that end up being more instinctual anyways, and I like. The gaffers and the key grips that I work with are all incredibly talented artists, and I want them to have their input to create. Yeah. And so I've never been someone who's just like, no, that light needs to go there, and it's got to be this color. It's always a discussion because they've been doing it so long that I want their input and their expertise. Yeah. And I'll not to say that I won't be didactic. Like I'll be like, I think this should be coming through the window. I think it should be this light. What do you think?
Yeah.
You know, and usually they'll be like, okay, or no, that's totally wrong. You know, but
Yeah.
I love lighting. Well, you didn't tell me to turn my phone off before
rookie mistake.
It's my mom. No, just kidding. So yeah, it's always a discussion. It's a creative process.
Yeah.
Which I love that process, you know.
Yeah.
Because film's a collaborative medium, so
Yeah.
everyone's talented.
And then do you take that same workflow to the commercial environment, or how does your
Yeah.
pre-production process change from a film set to where you maybe have slightly more time in pre-production depending on the film and then the
Right.
budget and everything and knowing the locations versus in commercials oftentimes you'll come on later,
Right.
you'll get storyboards that are already sort of framed,
Yeah.
not locked in sometimes, but more just like this is probably what they're expecting.
Yeah.
How does your workflow change from the two?
I've always found the process of commercials funny because they bring the DP in so late. I would love to be on the director's scout, and I'd love to be able to, be along for that process. And if the directors, if I know the director and I know them, they're going to bring me on, and they know I'm coming on, I'll start talking to them early.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, usually the storyboard's done, the location is chosen, so you don't really have the input to like choose the location. And it's almost like working. How do I fix the problem of what they've created sometimes?
Yeah.
Because
Fighting
there's
uphill.
always something. Yeah. But I actually really love that process because it helps me think quicker, and it helps me it goes back to my documentary background where I'm trying, we're in a room and this is the room you got. And
Yeah.
You got to try and figure out how to do it.
The problem solving bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a similar process to the movies, but I think it's tightened and it's less of a discussion, more like, what do you think? What do you think? Okay, let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you find that having done now multiple feature films,
Right.
that are you still drawn down that path of doing more and more features, or do you get back to the commercials and say, well, I'm happy doing both? Is there what's the blend?
I think I love doing commercials because it's it's short, it's quick. You meet a lot of people, a lot of directors who travel, and I love doing movies, for telling the story and and the chance to change something or have a message or just a visual idea that's bigger.
Yeah.
But I think I could probably only handle one, maybe two movies a year because you're so sucked into it that it takes all of your energy, which I love. But like once you're done, you're like, oh, holy shit! I feel like I've I need to detox for 2 months before I can do anything again.
Yeah.
And then you get pulled back into commercials or something else. But
Yeah.
it's been so I've only done one movie a year basically, and the rest commercials, which is good for now.
Yeah. Do you find that there is a process when you get done with the film where you sort of have to go out and remind people that you're now available, or
Right,
you can is there like a lull in between, or are you or your agent, are you planning for the
Right.
fact that you're going to be done and go straight into it
First I cry for 2 days.
by yourself?
Yeah.
Just shedding
A dark
tears.
room.
Yeah.
I would like to say that agents are planning for when I'm done. I don't know if that's
That would be
entirely
too much faith.
true.
Too much faith. Yeah, too
Usually
flattering.
I'll sort of remind them a week or two out.
Yeah.
And then get back into it. But really, when I get done with a film, I end up traveling for a bit just to
Decompression.
yeah, decompression and sort of, separate from the film world.
Yeah.
Which I think having that time off, no matter what you're doing, commercials or movies, is important to do stuff for yourself.
Yeah.
Because everything I do ends up being sort of film related. When I'm home, I'm watching films to learn about, either older films or new films coming out, and just keep versed in that film language. It's study because of what I love to do.
Yeah.
But you got to do other things sometimes too. So
Do you find when you're watching films, can you watch films just for films now?
Yeah,
Or are you
I
"Fuck,
can.
Who put
Yeah.
that light back there? What?
right.
I would not have done that.
When if the filmmaking, and I don't want to say if the filmmaking is bad, but if it
Oh,
calls
you would-
itself to the filmmaking,
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh, I feel the filmmaker's hand there. which I don't like. I like to just absorb into the film.
Yeah.
So, sometimes I see a lot of movies. I walk out of a lot of films and because, the movie pass is cheap these days. So
Yeah.
I'll start watching and be like, all right, I know what this is about. I'm going to go see something else right now. But I end up seeing a lot of stuff, blockbusters and whatever that I just to see everything and see how it's done.
Yeah.
I try not to I try to just absorb into the film and not notice the filmmaking.
So if you notice there's a
unless
problem,
they pull me into it somehow.
Suck you. And can you do you find that you can do that with your own work as well? Are you able to?
I can't watch my own work.
Oh no!
I just every time I see, it's hard for me to watch my own work in films because I sort of just see. I see everything that happened. And I see the process. I'm like, oh, I could have done that. I could have done that.
Yeah.
That fucked me. It's woe is me sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm probably my own worst critic. I hope I'm my own worst critic. If someone else is more critical of my stuff than me,
look out.
Fuck that person.
Exactly. They got to get a life. They got to think about their choices.
Just forget about me.
That's it. Nice. And so a movie like Siberia, what's your involvement from the time that it wraps up? How long does it take before it comes out? All that sort of stuff. What's your role?
So it depends on the film. Siberia was also directed by Matt Ross. So that the process of getting that film was, I did his first film. We worked great together. So we're doing this one, of course.
Yeah.
And then for once it's done, then you just sort of sit and wait for a little bit, and you do other projects, and eventually it comes to the color timing. When they figure out where it is. This was a unique film because it was shot in Winnipeg for Siberia and also for St. Petersburg, Russia, and then we went to St. Petersburg to do the exteriors to finish it up. So and then we came back and we had a lot of time off because usually the director has at least 2 to 3 months of hard editing. Yeah. Hopefully longer, but yeah. And then it just sort of depends on where it's going, what the schedule is to get it to the color correction process. So, let's see, we prepped from February. It was a longer prep because a lot of shit happened that I don't want to get into. But it ended up shooting in March to June. End of March to beginning of June or some time in there. Yeah. And then we color corrected in November, December. Yeah. So. And
do you remember when you're going in there to see it for the first time, you're like, "Fuck"?
It's terrifying.
What did I do?
Because you look at it and you're like, you for those 4 months before the color correction, you're like, "Oh fuck, why did I do that?" And I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, it should have been green. Yeah. And my girlfriend's like, go back to bed. Yeah. And then you get, they start sending you some rough cuts, and then you're either, it either soothes you or
you disassociate from the process.
You just say, oh, really even angrier.
Good luck.
And then you get to the color process and everything's, okay. Cause you didn't fuck it up completely. Yeah. And the color process is where it all sort of comes together for me. Yeah. I think these days you have to, you shoot with a look but you're so time crunched that you don't really have time to do a lot of color correction on set. Yeah. At least for a film like this where, we weren't allowed to have any overtime, and we had a finite number of shoot days, really small amount of shoot days for what it was, a lot of action. Yeah. Which takes longer, but we weren't allowed to shoot longer. So you had to be really planned, which we were, and there's not much time for the extras when you're doing that. So
racing around, don't have time to check from time to time to head over to the tent.
Yeah, you just don't. You go over there, but you can't tweak anything really. You just you just have to trust in the people that you're working with you. Yeah.
And did you know that going into it, okay, we're going to have to really be moving on this job, so maybe, did you set up a look in
so I knew we were going to be pretty fucked while we were shooting, so, we set up a look beforehand, and then, I worked with a lot of lights that I hadn't worked with before to get a quick color changing, so we worked with the digital Sputnik DS6s to be able to really change the color quickly and for the punch. Yeah. And
when you say you're setting up a look before, is the look like a LUT, or are you thinking like okay.
Yeah. So what I try and do is I try and have like sort of a base LUT for, each location in a lot of ways. So and usually I don't tweak it much once I have it. So there'll be a night LUT, there'll be a daytime LUT, and then interior LUT. And they should be symbiotic depending on the film, unless you're changing looks a lot. So this was a very cold, bleak film, so we had a LUT that was very cold and bleak with blues and all of that. And then when it gets to a different area, it's warmer. So we wanted to separate that. So we sort of built that in beforehand. And we had a test day, which was to test wardrobe and looks and actors and those sort of things. Yeah.
And are you doing anything crazy with? I mean, in that, especially if you have a smaller testing period, are you doing things in there with the camera, or are you sort of you know now how the Alexa works and you're focusing on other areas, because there's so many things you could be tweaking in that limited amount of time? Were you trying, well, what happens if we do this or that, or you already know that camera side of things?
For this, I feel like I had a pretty good knowledge of what the Alexa is going to do, so it was more just seeing what certain colors worked. We used the Panavision G series, so just sort of showing the director what the different lenses do, and because you're shooting anamorphics. So, we had shot master anamorphics for the first film with him, Frank and Lola. And we shot that entire film wide open at a 1.9.
Good luck, Focus Puller.
Yeah, and Focus Puller, and that was Dave Edsale, and he did an amazing job. But it was also a lot of not talking heads, but there was a lot of static shots where there wasn't much movement. And then when the movement came, actually he did an incredible job. But this one, I shot everything at a deeper stop on Siberia, because there was a lot of action involved, and I totally forgot what we were talking about. But
no, we were talking just about the camera and what you would have been testing early on.
Oh, right. Yeah, so it was mostly sort of the colors, the looks. We threw some production design elements in there. What the lenses were, that sort of thing. We tested some stops. We tested 2.8, 4, 5.6. But this was sort of the deepest stop I ever shot a film at. Before, based on that.
And that was for the amount of action that you knew you were going to be?
Amount of action. And it was sort of to see the environment a little bit more, and that sort of thing.
One of those old tricks, like if you have nice places, you want to see them. If you don't have nice places, you get rid of them. Makes sense.
So
and then knowing that someone is going to be watching that footage, for 3 months locked in a room, and you don't want to get them too locked on something crazy.
Right.
What's the process on the day? I mean, you say you don't have a lot of time to go over there in between shots, but do you get like a little report that says, these are the shots from the day, or stills, or what's happening when you're not on set but on the movie?
So what I did on this film is I actually bought a laser projector, an Epson laser projector, and a 15-foot screen. I put it in my apartment.
Okay.
And I had
the girlfriend was loving it.
Well, I was in Winnipeg, so
she
was back here. And I had the projector over the sink, and the apartment over the TV filling the projection screen filling the entire room. And we started off by screening the dailies. The first time we had producers and everyone over and screened the dailies in the apartment. And then after that, I was intending on screening them every day projected, but you're fucking exhausted, so it's hard to come back and screen them every day. So every once in a while we have the dailies on the iPad, of course, but we'd bring them in and watch them. I had a little DaVinci board where I had some of the raws, so I could tweak some of the colors if I wanted to, and so I did a little bit of that. Just seeing what worked. But
it always seems like those things, like you say, you start off with the intentions of, we can do this, and then by the second week, you're like, fuck, I'm tired.
We got the look. You need to. I think once you get into the flow of the film, you need to have that off time, because otherwise you're just going to explode. So when you come back from shooting, it's hard to sit down and watch dailies, because you're like, I just want to forget about that day and move on to the next day.
Separation.
So I think it's good to if it's possible to do dailies during lunch, and have that projection set up. I've never done that, but I've heard they've done that in the olden days.
Back when it was good.
So maybe one day we can get back to that again.
And were you guys shooting 2 cameras? Because
so
of
we
the
had 2
action?
cameras. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had 2 operators. I had made, I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but like on the film before called The Last Word, directed by Mark Pellington. It was with Shirley MacLaine and Amanda Seyfried. And there's 2 cameras, and I was operating one, and my other operator, Mike Merriman, was operating the other. And that was hard because that was more instinctual. Mark didn't like storyboard, so we would just his process was sort of like, getting the shot flying around, which is great. It was very instinctual, sort of more music from the music video days. And so we would get the shot that way and sort of move in, but I could never see what the other operator was doing. Yeah. And by the time I saw it, it was too, Mike did an amazing job, so luckily it worked, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to operate again without seeing the other stuff. So, we ended up 2 operators, one to Steadicam and operate Keith Murphy from Toronto. Yeah. And the other one is just on the sticks.
Yeah. And then did that change your workflow? Had you done that on a commercial before? Had you tested out the idea of how you would, because I imagine it could change some things if you're not sitting there touching the camera and fiddling with it. Like, did it at all alter your workflow sitting at the monitor rather than next to the camera?
I had done it for commercials frequently. I love operating, but I also love stepping back. If I'm working with people that I'm confident in, I love stepping back and telling what I want and then seeing what extra layers they can add to that. And then being next to the director and being able to change things on the fly, because when you're operating, it depends on the kind of movie. If it's something more handheld and instinctual, which I'm used to doing from documentaries, which I also love, but I couldn't do that on a bigger budget film. If it was a small budget film and it was just flying around with a camera, getting stuff, I'd rather be operating. Yeah. But if it's, bigger and you have all the set pieces and action, you need to see the film holistically. Yeah. And you need to be constantly talking to the director about what you're seeing. So you have to step back and see that. Otherwise you miss things. Yeah. There is something too. There's something fun about, I don't know if fun is the word, but there's something interesting about that you don't get if you're at the camera. Right. Is you get, I think it feels, it's almost like it looks, the pleasant surprises happen more because someone else is like, I know how I would do it. Right. And I would do it, and the way that I would do it in my head, I'm like, this doesn't look that good. Like I would be telling myself, I'd be like, this is how I would do it. Right. Like, and then you look at the monitor, you're like, this looks like how I would think. But then sometimes when you have operators and you come back to the monitor, you're like, looks fucking good. Yeah. Like, I would better never, than I could do that. I never would have done that. Right. There is that moment of surprise. But because it is such, even if it is a very controlled environment, it's those millimeters and inches of difference that make the difference in the look. So you have to be, even if you're very controlling, you still have to be quite trusting of the operators. Yes. What was your process for, how did you find the people? Was it people that you'd worked with before? Right. So we were shooting in Toronto, in Winnipeg, so I had never worked, wasn't allowed to bring anyone from the US because of the Canadian rules. Yeah. So I was working with people I'd never worked with before, so I had to go off references, some local people from Winnipeg, some people from Toronto. Yeah. And it was a hard process finding people especially because you don't know anybody, and it's a whole different place where you don't, so you're relying on other people's input. Yeah. Luckily we found some good people, but it's like it seems like a crapshoot because it's. I mean, yes, you want people that are good, right? But if you're spending 3 months with the people, you want them to be not bags of shit as well, right? And it's a big enough budget of a movie where like you should be able to get good people come in. And honestly, the first part of the process was a lot of saying no to production. No, I'm not going to use that person. No, I'm not going to use that person. And you have to fight for who you want to bring on, because especially in a small local environment, they're going to, for the most part, production really just cares about bringing in people from the local area, because they want to keep their people working, which makes sense. So you have to fight for the people that can do quality work that you can bring in with you, and that was a struggle, but we ended up Yeah, and what the actual process is, they will, if you say you weren't going to fight and you were new to the system, they just give you a list and they say, okay, Eric, go away and come back with people that you want to work with. Yeah, so that they give you the list of the local people. Yeah. Not to knock on local people, but like, there's...
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You don't have to pull any punches about Winnipeg. No, I'm only kidding.
But so, and then, it depends on where you're going and how hard they push back.
Yeah.
And so it depends on their self-interest and all of that. So there's a lot of pushback, and eventually we came to an area where it worked.
Yeah.
Because it ultimately costs more money to bring people in. They have to put them up. They have to fly them in. They have to bring their gear in.
Yeah.
All that stuff. So
yeah. And then when
you need producers that fight for it too, like your own the producer that's fighting for your work and for your process. That's extremely helpful.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point, because I don't think, if you haven't done a feature, I don't think people understand the inner workings of how many, because it's. Yes, in commercials, there's a lot of people that have interest because there's the agency and the client and the director, but it's a little bit more overt because everyone is pulling from the same budget. But really, the people making the decisions at the end of the day of whatever will go on television is the client and agency, and the director can sort of show them the best stuff.
Right.
But in a feature environment, it is weird, the groups that band together to see how the money gets allocated and who fights for what and who people are fighting against.
Right.
Do you find yourself, I guess, where is the collaboration the most important to get the stuff that you want? Is it in the conversations with the director and getting them on your side, and then the director going to the producer? Have you found?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Where is the power, basically?
It always really helps to have the director on your side and fighting for you, because if they're not, it makes it nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And with my relationship with Matt, he's literally a fighter. He was a boxer when he was, so he fought tooth and nail for everything that we needed alongside me. Yeah. And we got bloody, but we got some things that we wanted. But you have to fight more than you could ever possibly imagine.
Because I think people find that counterintuitive. Yeah. You would think, we've got Eric on the job, let's get him the tools that he thinks he needs.
Right, but it's not like that. Because, and you don't blame people, but people in production, they just want to make things easy for themselves. It's not like everyone is trying to make the best product. A lot of times they're just trying to get the job done. Yeah. And they don't know. They don't know why something is needed. They might sort of know, but like you have to really tell them why you need this piece of gear or this person. Yeah. This pillow without feathers. Whatever. Yeah. whatever you need. Yeah. And it's a struggle. Like films are a struggle to get that, because there's the money's going to so many different places. So the line producer is trying to, spread it out, and every department head wants what they want. So it's not like you're not fighting with our department heads, but you're fighting with the production to get what you need for. Yeah. And
it seems like it will still be interesting, 40 years from now in doing it, because everyone is so different and all the dynamics are so different, even before you get to the actual story bit, before you get to the actual filmmaking side. The ability to, I'm sure now you're much better at navigating the system than you were on your first feature, of knowing when to, it's almost as important what you chime in with as when you're chiming in and who you're chiming in with, in order to get that.
It's ironic, because the first film I was on, the one that got canceled the day before, that was a fight from day one to get what I wanted. So I think from that first experience, I was like, oh, this is how it has to be. Yeah. They're going to tell me you can't have anything, and I'm going to say this is what I want, and I'm going to try and get anything. Yeah. And luckily I had, from my background, I used to blog a lot about equipment, and because I couldn't get a gear, so there's all these gear that I wanted that I couldn't afford, and I was like, well, what's the best way to get that gear? And so I would write the companies and be like, can I use this for my shoot? I'll write about it. Yeah. If I like it, Yeah. And then they'd send it to me, and I actually I had a big blog following that way. Yeah. And then ultimately I think the blog got in the way because directors didn't really like I was writing about the shoots, and I think
it's frowned upon.
Yeah. I don't think that really worked. Yeah. But it did get me gear, it did get me all these things. And so I built these relationships with equipment companies. And so when I need something, I can ask for it, and I'll do a write-up or something about it, or help, and that helps get stuff sometimes too. So you have to help the production in a lot of ways, as well, like getting stuff.
Yeah, things you can bring to the table besides just your problem solving, basically.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
not just image.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say like you're fighting with the production. It's the good fight, the greater fight of working together to get what you want.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's people pooling their ideas and the problem solving to fight the budget. Like it's always
exactly. Yeah, I don't mean physically you're actually fighting production, although sometimes that does happen. Yeah. But it's more about
boxer. You want to stay away from director boxers.
No physical fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fighting that budget to get what you need and working together.
I actually remember because that's how I originally started following you is from the blog. Yeah.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, because
nice.
you had a job where I had a job where I was doing like tabletop stuff and people had a picnic thing.
Sure.
And you had a blog post about Profoto. Like Profoto had come out with like this giant dome thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, I got to do this tabletop thing. I'm like, maybe I should just look up like what other people have done.
Nice.
Saw that and I was like, okay, here we go. Profoto it is.
Sweet.
So somewhere out there.
Did it work or did it not work?
No, it did work.
Sweet.
Yeah. I didn't get fired. I got paid. Yeah. Eventually the jobs keep going. Yeah. So it's funny. But it is true. Like, it does sometimes. It's an interesting balance between taking the road that way of sharing so much information that things get that pull away from the project,
right? Versus
being in there inside the blog.
And I should say when I was doing the blog, it was kind of before Instagram, so there was no other outlet besides doing a blog post that I was capable of, because I had written before, and it was sort of like another creative outlet. And Instagram, it makes it easier now to sort of write and show images and talk. People are more used to it now. Yeah.
And do you use Instagram? Do you find people coming to you for work, or is it more that you connect with other cinematographers and see you sort of have your pulse on what's happening?
Yeah, I use Instagram. I look at other work. I look at photography, art, what other directors are doing. Some other cinematographers as well. I try not to I try not to get sort of caught up in what other DPs are doing, because I don't, there's sort of a lot of style stealing, and for me, my style is sort of, I don't have one specific style. I sort of do it based off of what the project needs. Yep. Like I try to be more of a chameleon in that aspect. So I don't want to look at other DPs' work and be like, oh, I need to start shooting that way a lot of degree. But I love still photography. So I like putting stills up. And then sometimes stuff in the shoot, but I use it. I don't use it I don't post as much as I guess I probably should. Yeah. I do it when I remember to do it. Or
yeah, exactly. Not sitting there all day long. It's it's interesting that you say, because that is a very, and I don't even know if it's a conscious choice that people make, but there are sort of two camps on whether you're the type of person that I do this, right? And if you want this is then you come to me, right? Versus you're the person that can do all of these things, and whether or not that have you seen that? I guess the question is, have you seen that negatively impact, or have you felt that negatively impact stuff like, oh well, Eric sort of does it all, so he's not right for this?
Yeah, I don't know if it's negatively impacted me. No one's told me directly.
Yeah, or even in like the work you get done with the project, and you're like, fuck, I would have been better if we did it this way, sort of thing.
I have to think about that. I don't know. I think when I say that I can switch styles, I don't mean it's devout of style. Like I do put a lot of style into a lot of the pieces that I do. Yeah.
But it's not like you always work with zooms and you only work with zooms and you have to have a little...
exactly. I think if you're doing that, at least for me personally, that's totally limiting. And it's also, I don't want to... how do I say that without being derogatory? It doesn't work for me. Like I don't feel like my style should impose on the project. I feel like I want to look at the project and look at how it should work and sort of take from this and then put that into the project, as opposed to being like, well, this is me, this is what I do, this is what you're going to get. Yeah. Which works for a lot of DPs. Yeah. And I love a lot of that work, but it doesn't work for me. Yeah. Because I want, for me, it's more about story and what's telling the story, because I have that background reading from AFI and from writing and doing my own projects in the past. So for me, it's just about what evokes the story the best.
Yeah, and that really is that is the very first decision,
right?
You know, for any project is how are you going to, you know, are you going to find the best solution, or are you going to be the solution in the sense that how I do it is how it will look. And
if that's necessary, I can do that. I can be like, well, I'll do this. You know, I've done this, and it could look exactly like that. Like a director would be like, this past work, like, can you make it look more in that range? Or, you know. And
in your collaborations with directors, on commercials and features, do you find yourself drawn to one particular, you know, do you work better with someone who's more visual than less visual? Do you like someone to say, Eric's the guy, I'll leave it to you and I'll worry about other stuff? What sort of balance do you find yourself working the best in?
Sure. Well, I'll give you one example. A director I work a lot with named Keith Rivers, who's a very visual director, and he'll just throw out a bunch of ideas, and we'll just sort of back and forth. We'll sort of go back and forth of what it should be, what it should look like. Yeah. Because I feel like he also is in the same boat. Like, he doesn't have a specific style that he does. He sort of can encompass everything. So we really do change it up a lot based off of the project. You know, for example, last week we did a Microsoft commercial for Microsoft for their new laptop.
Surface Stinger.
Yeah, I won't say what it is because I don't know if well, it'll be out by the time this is out. It's a
Microsoft
thing.
Yeah.
You know, but Keith saw this thing with lasers, and we found this laser guy that you see when it shoots the lasers up, it only shows in camera. You can't actually see it. Oh, yeah. And so we were playing with that and in a different style of lighting and using a techno dolly to sort of, you know, weave through things. And that was different than we had done our previous, you know, stuff, which was, what did we do before? You know, it was for SoundCloud. We were just following an artist around and, you know, more doc look style. Not doc. It's not doc at all. It's controlled look, but a totally different look, basically. Yeah. But I think what I like about commercials is you get to work with a lot of different style directors, and it helps you sort of expand your brain in a lot of ways, and your toolkit, because you can, you know, work with one director that just likes to be completely instinctual, or another one that likes to plan things out completely. So I sort of vibe and see what they like, how they like to work, and I myself can totally adapt to how they like to work. I think, you know, I that's something I pride myself on, being able to like fit into any situation. Well,
you definitely, as a commercial cinematographer, like you say, you're working with so many different people. That really is one of the skills, is being able to be, and it sounds, you know, a lot of the time it's associated with a negative connotation, but being a cog in the wheel. Right. The wheel of commercial production is just spinning.
Yes.
And you just slot in there and you're like, okay, now how can I make a difference?
Right.
You know, and finding that balance is sometimes tricky, but it's certainly a skill to be able to come on board and immediately be able to contribute positively.
Exactly. I mean, it's like a company that comes in, sets up a company, runs the company over 2 weeks, and closes the company and moves on. It's like you gotta work within that system somehow to, like, you know, really fit in and make it work.
And so when you take you know, in your commercial setups or even in the feature film world, you take all of the outside influences and you try and come up with the best solution. How does that translate to the camera? You know, are you someone that you like to set the camera up the same way every time? You like to bring your own monitor? Do you have any things that you do to keep a consistency where you do have control?
Yeah, I have some consistent things. I'm a believer in owning a lot of your own gear that you use all the time, that you know is going to work. So I have a 25-inch OLED that I know is going to look a certain way every time. Sometimes I have a focus. I have a WCU4 that either the AC uses that, or I just have it on, you know, the iris, so that I can control that, whatever the AC likes to use. But, you know, then I have a lot of other small knickknacks and specialty lights and things that I, you know, from light mats to these Dado D-LED 7s that
punch them in.
And to like these RGB lights. We're using the Astera tubes a lot now. Where it can change color. They're great. So I have these sort of specific things that I know I can just throw in and use them, and that they do the job. And also, as a DP, you have to figure out income-wise, like how you can help generate more, because, you know, as a commercial DP, no matter how much you work, you know, you still need to add to that in some way.
And do you then take that information, like say the OLED monitor, you know, okay, I know what the end result, if I'm on set, if it looks like this is how it actually looks.
Right.
Do you take that, how does that affect your exposure on set? Like, how are you working on, say, for example, Siberia?
Sure.
How are you going through and deciding on an exposure for the camera now in today's world where you can just, look at a monitor, and if you trust it, sort of be in the world of where you want to be.
Right.
What's your process now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to underexpose to some degree because that's definitely one aesthetic which I like, which so not as poppy, but sort of more undertone colors. And I'm always, I always bring my meter with me, and I never fucking use it because I always really want to use it. Like I really want to use the fucking meter, but I never. I might bring it out once and be like. Yeah, all right, I could have just looked at that. So on the monitor, I have, I use the Predator mode, the color bars, or, histogram or waveform or whatever, all combination of those things just to see what range. I try and get skin tones at a certain IRE, because I know what I like. Yeah. And as far as a LUT, I usually try and have it be a little bit down so that I don't, the 709 Airy LUT's kind of awful, so I try and, do my own version where it's like a little bit more down, highlights rolled off. Yeah. And that way I know what I can do in post. Yeah. Ironically, in commercials, most of the time you don't get to do the color correction. So if you have time, I like to go to the DIT and have them plug in a look, which on commercials more often you do. However, I can't count how many times I've seen the final product and be like, I did not color it that way. Like they didn't even ask me. You know?
Yeah. Just
and I gave them LUTs and with specific.
Those things go right down the toilet.
But but mostly, who knows who's doing the color? Yeah. So
yeah, and have you been able now to having so much experience in commercials specifically? Have you been able to identify when those situations where you may work on 30 commercials in a year, and some of them just turn out like shit, like that's just the way it's going to be, then you're not going to be happy with the results, right? Are you able now to find, do you find yourself getting a better ratio as you get older? Are you able to identify, well, fuck, this is a red flag, right? Like I don't want to be involved in this.
Well, none of my commercials have ever turned out like shit.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I was thinking of other people. I'm thinking of the others.
You must be talking about other dudes. I think sometimes you take a job and you're like, I know how this is going to go. I'm taking this job to take the job. Yeah. And other times you get excited because you're like, oh, this is really an opportunity to do something unique and look cool. And I feel like I can sense those now beforehand. But honestly, I'm surprised quite often because like the budgets in the jobs are they're different than they used to be. And so but I think the tools are better now. Yeah. I was always someone who like tried to find the newest technology and use it, find what works and use it, as opposed to like just using something because it's new. But I think technology is so good now. There's so many versatile lighting and camera equipment that you can use it to change things quickly when things aren't working or to get that look that you want. Yeah. And so I feel like I can sense when I'll be able to really push things for the look. Yeah. And do you, now knowing the technology so intimately and having worked with the same cameras for so long, do you find yourself like, okay, we're doing a commercial, right. Eric, we want you to do it. Yes, come on. Do you have to think about the camera based on the project, or do you just know like, okay, this is probably what this is Alexa? I've pretty much been doing Alexa only lately, although we just used the Alexa LF for the first time.
Oh, nice. How was it?
Microsoft. So we, it was so new that when we went to Panavision, we were like, okay, we'll use it with the T-Series anamorphic because we want, anamorphic and even they didn't know that the T-Series vignetted on the LF. Yeah. For, if you crop, you can do it, but like we don't wanted the full, 4.5K raw. Yeah. So, I get a call like at 3:00 saying the lenses aren't working. So I went in and we ended up using the Primo 70 large format lenses.
Oh, they vignetted that much so you couldn't use
but they
them.
weren't usable. Yeah. Wow. I mean, you can crop to use it, but so then we used their 70 millimeter lenses, which are beautiful big format lenses. Yeah. And that was a discovery because like, usually I'm used to being like, okay, we'll just do these there's a lot of things on the LF that aren't finalized yet. It
Yeah.
seems like you can't. There isn't even a battery back on it yet.
That's what I was going to ask, because
Yeah.
I had heard that like it needed a certain voltage, that you couldn't just use your typical V mount or Anton Bauer
You
battery.
can't use any.
There's nothing.
Nothing.
So what were you doing?
So we're on the Techno Dolly the whole time,
okay.
so we could just
Yeah.
AC power. So that was fine. I'm sure I would have, if I was handheld, I would have had like someone carrying a battery
Yeah, the
behind
grip
me.
backpack, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, this is a very specific look, so I can't say that I really saw the range of what the camera does, but it's pretty amazing. It's also pretty amazing how Aries sort of had one sensor for
Just keep
years.
milking that
All
thing,
they
yeah.
did was put two of them together,
Yeah.
and stitch it. I think you can even see the stitch marks on the sensor.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
But it's great. I mean, it's finally a 4+K camera from
Yeah.
Arri that everyone's going to have. So.
I mean, do you think that will just be, because now if you say, okay, we want to use the Alexa on
Right.
this commercial,
Yeah.
99% of the time it's going to be a mini.
Yeah.
Unless for some reason you would have some, but that has really become the go-to.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you foresee that will be the go-to? You know, and like does it seem like
No,
it fits in that slot?
because you can't fit it on a Movi.
Yeah.
Like you might be able to fit it on the bigger one, or the Ronin. No, but it doesn't really work for that, for like real moves. So like,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of shoots these days. I mean, I love putting a camera on the Movi and just going and finding the shot and getting that movement. Unless you need something more specific control movement with a steady cam. But
Yeah.
so I think until they find, I would bet either they're gonna in a year have a large format mini, or maybe they've been developing another sensor and something else will come up. But I think the mini is still going to be the predominant. It's also, the LF is crazy expensive because there's only 50 in the country right now.
Yeah.
So once that gets cheaper, it'll be used more and more. But the workflow now is people mostly use the small camera for a reason, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes it all easier.
Yeah.
And do you so that is sort of one example. But when you're doing the commercials, are you thinking about, do you have to go through the testing process of a new camera comes out? Like, do you go and test out the Panasonic Varia camera or something like that?
I find that I'm not too interested in. I started off with Red, and I used that a lot because I owned it and I liked it. It was slow motion, multiple Ks, whatever the K wore.
Yeah.
And then I just started using the Alexa and fell in love with the color. So until I see something that shows this beautiful color, what I would love is to be able to shoot at a higher ISO so that you can sort of control depth of field better. So I can pick any doesn't matter the ISO, and pick any depth of field that you want and shoot at that. I've heard good things about the Venice in terms of that aspect. I don't know about the color or the other aspects, so I'm going to look into that. But that's the next phase that has to happen soon.
Yeah.
And I know the technology's there, so I would, to be able to use a small amount of light but shoot high ISO and choose whatever stop you want is the ultimate of storytelling, because you can separate people from the background more. You can do whatever camera tricks you want, and that's the holy grail. So hopefully that it gets to that point very soon.
Yeah, and when you're just starting out, you sort of have the time to go out and research all the latest tools, and you talk about the blog and going out and trying to be on the cutting edge of finding out what's happening.
Yeah.
Are you still like that now?
Yeah, I don't have time to test really. So if I want to use something, I'm not afraid to try something on a shoot, like the LF, for example. I didn't test it before we did a laser test to see how the lasers worked, because but we didn't I wasn't testing the camera to see if we're going to use this camera. I knew we were going to use it, whether it worked or didn't. But for certain lighting, I love trying new lights on set and seeing how I can work it into the workflow, or any sort of camera gear. I love trying that. So,
yeah. And do you also in the commercials that are here in Los Angeles, you try and keep up the same crew when you move from project to project?
Yeah. So I mean, it really depends. I have a bunch of great guys that I work with here, and I try and keep them on. The thing is though, is there's a lot of them are movie guys too, so they're gone on Transformers or whatever, and I'm like, okay, so then I. But luckily I have a lot of people that I work with, so I can try that out. But when I'm on, on a lot of commercials or travel jobs, and hardly ever am I allowed to bring. Sometimes I can bring an AC, but it's hardly ever that I'm allowed to bring a gaffer or key grip or whatever.
Yeah.
So I end up working with a lot of people from out of town and learning how to work with them.
Have you got a system for that? Because sometimes that can be tricky.
It's really tricky.
Depending on, especially, if you go into a smaller market that may not have the same.
So in certain areas, I find that, let's see if I can put this in a delicate way.
Mildly.
Yeah. In certain areas, I have to be more hands-on and more direct.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
And that's what it ends up being, is whether you trust the people to be like, I want this feel, do what you think is best, or I want that light angled at 43 degrees with this amount of color on it coming through this window with, no, you got to put the diffusion halfway up, that sort of thing. I don't like doing that because I feel like, again, I like the collaborative process and I like working with people, but I think when you go into smaller markets, a lot of times they're not used to the perfection that we as ourselves want from something. So they're used to being like, oh, well, he wants a light through the window. Let's just put this light through the window. I'm like, I didn't mean actually literally through the window. Like, you need to back it up 6 feet and,
I have lived that conversation.
Yes.
Like, no, not, okay.
Exactly.
Now I'm going to have to watch you.
And it actually brings it back to the environment that create on set. I had a professor at AFI named Bill Dill, and his thing he kept saying over again is you need to be relentlessly positive. And I found that actually helped me because I can't say that I'm always relentlessly positive, but like I always try and be even keel on set and not let the highs and lows get to me, because punches come at you and you, not to do another boxing metaphor,
stir them along, keep going.
But you need to be able to absorb them and take hits for the director, take hits from just be able to like not let anything get to you, because everyone's looking to you on set to like. Even the director, and, you have to control the set in a lot of ways. So I found like making it light, but like serious, but light. And that's that balance of finding it and letting, so if you're somewhere, I'm not going to name a city, and like, they've literally put the light through the window. You can't be like, you fucking asshole, what are you doing? Like, I can't do that.
Not on the first day.
Not on the first day. Second day, you
start the assholes. Yeah.
So you have to sort of be like, okay, that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
How about let's move it back now and see if literally the light just falls through the window. That sort of.
I like how you got more delicate.
Yeah.
There. It just falls.
I think the bigger the situation, the more delicate you have to be. So it's. I think it's an important lesson to other DPs is how you are on set actually does matter.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people can't control their emotions and they just let it go, and that might work for some people. But I think I want crews to be symbiotic. You need them to work with you. And like, if you start getting angry and yelling at them, that doesn't work. It's it's a collaboration. So.
Yeah. And certainly something that I think would get better as you get more experience and you find out, there's that, if you're setting up a shot, there's that 10 minutes where when things can get done and what actually like, when the point of like, oh fuck, we're in serious trouble.
Yes.
Now, like now we have to go.
Yeah.
And that point where you can like say, just put the light through the window and you see it come through. You're like, fuck, okay.
Right.
Let's
like
maybe
a giraffe.
Try.
You just see the head coming through and
like maybe we try something different. But it is a matter of, like you say, some personalities are just going to be much more, not in line with that theory.
Yes.
But then there is also the comfort of knowing, okay, I can say these things and I know I still have time to sort it out properly.
Yeah.
Which is experienced.
Yes.
And but it's interesting too, because you wonder, because I think if it was Christopher Doyle maybe, who was talking about screaming on set and getting upset on and the fine line between, or for the DP to be that person that is positive,
right,
but to also be the hand that is constantly guiding. So
you have to be a positive guiding hand.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and just still go down that path that you had initially thought out.
Exactly.
That's the trick. But do you have a system that you use when you, especially on commercials where maybe you don't have that lookbook?
Right.
Do you just go off of the interactions with the crew at the beginning, saying like, okay, fuck, I got to watch these guys, or you just see how they go? I
think at first, if I haven't worked with the crew, the first sort of setup, the first talking to them at first, I kind of get it. I can always sort of get a good idea of how it's going to go, how on it they are.
Yeah.
Usually in the scout.
Yeah.
And then the first setup is the biggest test. And I usually
point of no return.
Yeah, exactly. And so I usually judge it from the first setup. I usually know how I need to work with them to get what we need. Sometimes there's surprises, but like, you know, I can tell. I think, you know, when I was younger, I studied a lot of psychology and a lot of, you know, I still read a lot on that subject and philosophy and things like that. And so I feel like every day I'm sort of using those skills in my work environment to sort of, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're sort of like therapists, psychologists in a way too. Like, you know, whether it's the mood of what's evoked from what you're showing with the lighting or how you're speaking to the director or the, you know, or the crew, it's like that all is symbiotic. So I feel like I'm using those skills all the time.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. From the outside, there's so many different, you know, people see the end result.
Yeah.
But there's so many, it's the little tiny conversations or the words in between that actually, yes, you know, you got to have a nice location, nice talent, nice people. You got to have the lights that you need.
Yeah.
But really it comes down to the decisions that are made of just those little words to people that will actually get because you can't, at a certain point, like you say, you can't do these things by yourself.
No.
You need people to help you. And even if you somehow magically you could, it wouldn't be the same process and it wouldn't come out the same. So it is that finding that line of,
it's a balance
in
a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's tricky. And now, so Siberia is out in July.
July 13th.
And what's next? Are you looking at scripts now? Do you dive straight back into something? How does it work?
Yeah, so I've been doing commercials and then I've been reading scripts. I have a movie that is supposed to start in a few months. We'll see. But
Spoken like a man that's had a movie fall apart.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I think actually literally every one of the movies that I've done and ones that have not happened have almost fallen apart at some point. Literally.
It's just par for the course.
It's just how movies are so hard to get made. And even once they're made, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
So this particular film is supposed to start up in summerish. So that's on the plate. And then in the meantime, I'm just doing commercials and, you know.
Living the LA dream.
Living the LA
in the sunshine.
Yeah.
Don't
leave the house. Although it's gloomy. You
came just terrible now, man. I got hosed.
Yeah. Why'd you do that?
June gloom.
Yeah.
Bummer. Yeah. So it's as we sort of wrap it up, is there something that we sort of do this every time?
Yeah.
Is there something that maybe in your AFI days when you were coming out of school, you'd been like, listen, dipshit, this is how you should do it.
Yeah.
This is what the major mistake that you will make sometime in your life in this, or what you should be working on. You know? Because a lot of people think, especially people that contact the podcast or talk to the people that we have on the podcast, is like, where should you be focusing your energy if you don't know what makes the biggest difference? So,
yeah, it's funny you say that because I'll talk about. I taught a class at AFI a month ago because they bring a different DP in for this class every week.
Yeah.
And the focus of the class was what not to do, and I basically talked about all the mistakes I thought I had made. I went through the history of a very detailed history of my work and how I'd gone through it and all the times I did something I shouldn't have done that I think had repercussions later down the road.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, if you're coming out of school, one is just to work in any capacity you can.
Volume.
Yeah. But it's sort of not burn bridges in a way, because that can sort of catch you down the road. When you come out of school, you really think you know something. There's so many kids that come, especially at AFI, where you come out and you're you think the way to do everything. And when you end up realizing is that's fucking bullshit. You don't know anything actually. Yeah. And I think sometimes that affects your relationships in a way, because you're oh, I know how to do this. And this person that I'm working with, this director or this whatever, they, I'm going to tell them they don't know how to do this because this is the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And that can hurt you down the road. And the fact is you don't really know how to do that. You're learning it as you go.
Yeah.
So I think being prideful is an issue. And to sort of be open to things and projects and just do as much as you can. Just find all those shooting jobs. Don't worry if it doesn't, if it only pays $100, you never know where that's going to pay off down the road. And, just fucking work and get it out there.
Yeah. Investing in the work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people come out of school expecting to just work right away. And that's obviously really hard to do, especially now when there's easy to get a camera. There's so many DPs out there. So you need to build the relationships with either people at school or outside of school. Just find these cool projects and just build the relationships with the people and keep working with them.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's crewing or whether it's shooting or, you know, just finding a music video to do and doing those sorts of things. I think it's extremely helpul.
Yeah, I think a good point too, because I won't make you rehash all of the mistakes that you've made, but
There's so many.
It would be, I would be interested in hearing, you know, was it more, I have my own answer. Is it,
Tell me what the answer
I'm already formulating it for you.
Tell me your mistakes.
Yeah. No, were they more centered on the stuff that was happening on set with the camera, or is it more stuff that surrounds the process of being involved in filmmaking?
I think a lot of it is disagreement on how something should be, whether it be process or look or something. And I think as a DP, you have to realize like you have a way you want it to look and do how to feel, but ultimately it's the director's project. And if they want to shit all over that, like, you know, that's their prerogative.
Yeah.
But if you tell them afterwards you shit all over my work, that's not really a good thing to, you know, to do, because ultimately they're going to go off and work again, and they're going to be like, well, that guy just told me to fuck off, so why would I work with him again?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's a generalized basic premise.
Yeah.
But sometimes when the process goes wrong, and you just want to like lash out and be like, this process is fucked up, and like sort of blame someone for it that might not necessarily be their fault, you know. I try and leave the blame thing out of it, because, you know, you never know when it's going to come around to get you work.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Without being specific.
Yeah. Well, you like there. I mean, there's so many people involved in features or commercials.
Yeah.
That you don't really know. Yeah, it's very hard to pinpoint.
Yeah.
Like this person single-handedly shit the bed.
Right.
That's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you really do know.
Oh yeah.
But even if you do know.
Yeah, those are the easy ones.
Yeah.
Then it's easy, because if you know, chances are everyone else is pretty much in on the whole gag. Anyway.
Right.
But it's that one where it's like it just doesn't come out.
Yeah.
Or something doesn't come off as you would expect.
Yeah. So, like, you know, you got to learn these lessons, and I just think coming out of things with an open mind, especially after school, where you just take everything, just do it, you know.
Yeah.
I also talked to them about at a certain point making a choice whether you want to crew or DP, and I made a choice to never, like, you know, maybe I'd done one or two crew projects, but then I was like, I'm never going to crew. I'm only going to shoot, and I'm not going to work for a little bit. I had the design to fall back on.
Yeah.
But like when you make that choice, you sort of get out of the mindset of, I'm an AC, but I want a DP.
Yeah.
You have to make that separation at some point. Whether that's a smart choice, I don't know. But like it helped for me, because I was never like, you know, I was a terrible AC, but I'm, you know, gaffer or something like that.
Yeah.
I chose to just only DP, whether it fucked me or not. That's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I'm not saying do that right away, but it helps to make that leap, because mentally you've made that leap. And so sometimes when you make that mental leap, it helps you actualize on it in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And we've
not to get all Tony Robbins on it.
But it's true. And it's also interesting, because you would have been almost the first wave where that decision could have been realistically made.
Right.
You know, you started 10 years earlier.
Right.
Just getting the access to the shit to make the stuff that you were working on would have been difficult.
Yes, exactly.
So now, did you ever feel like, oh, fuck, maybe I should have done that? Like, was there ever points where you would have seen the benefit of being on someone else's?
I think there's always a benefit of being on someone else's set, where you can see how someone else does things, which I never really had the opportunity to do. Yeah. I never interned. Excuse me, sorry.
No, go for it.
So I basically everything that I'm doing is sort of I just came up with in a lot of ways. Either, you know, at AFI we had Wally Pfister come in and like all these great DPs and show us how to do things. Like I learned a lot right light a car from Bill Bennett. I learned to, do a poor man's process from Wally Pfister. Like, we learned those things, but I never was on set.
Yeah.
Learning those things from other great DPs.
Yeah.
I think we are at a stage now where the technology is all there. Like, you can have a small budget and make great stuff, or you can have a huge budget, make shitty stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me. What? So yeah, you were right. Like, when I came out, it was things were changing. Like, cinematic tools to create good work was just coming available, and we could utilize that. And now it's now it's you can get Alexa for anything. Like, just go on one of the ShareGrid or one of those other places.
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
Just pick one up cheap. So
giving them away. Beautiful. Well, I mean, I'm a fan of the work.
Thank you.
I love the commercial stuff and the feature stuff. Looking
Thanks.
forward to Siberia.
Thanks.
And thanks for taking the time to come out.
Thanks for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for episode 134. Eric Koretz is in the can. And a big thank you to all the Patreon supporters for making it possible. Again, this was an LA trip, and we were in the studio live, and Eric was actually the first person we did on the trip. So he was sort of the test subject. So big thanks to him also for putting up with all of our antics. And look who it is. It's the Music Bed, and they sponsored this podcast. So now that means I'm reading some copy. Ladies and gentlemen, Film and Music Conference 2018 is here. Before we talk about that, though, let's talk about something, just in case I don't want you to forget that the Music Bed is home to some of the best music in the world, available for your projects. And at their website, musicbed.com, you can find all of the music you need for your own projects. We've talked about it so many times on this podcast, where they've done crazy amounts of things for Oscar-winning shorts and tons of television commercials that they've been involved in. And if you're looking for music for your next project, you can find it at the Music Bed. Also, you can save a certain percentage, which I'm missing off the top of my head now because I don't have it in front of me, off your next on-site license by using the coupon code WanderingDP something. It'll be in the show notes. That was a terrible plug for that one. That'll be in the show notes page if you're interested, but go check them out, musicbed.com. So they have some of the best music floating around, and they got together with Film Supply, who's got some of the best stock footage floating around. I don't even know if you can call it stock footage. It's so good. More like better than stock footage. And they teamed up and said, hey, why don't we host a conference where we get a whole bunch of talented, super smart people together? They can mingle with each other and then go out in the world, make those connections into a reality, and produce some fantastic stuff. And that's exactly what they've done. The Film and Music Conference 2018, the second iteration of the conference, is going to be held in Fort Worth, Texas, September 28th and 29th. And I mentioned it on the show, and this is probably not the smartest thing to do from my perspective, but as a sponsor of the podcast, I took it upon myself to say, maybe it would be a good idea if we could give away some tickets, and tickets plural. That was probably my first mistake, but also I mentioned that before I'd actually talked to the people at the Music Bed. And interesting that I would do that because they are the nicest people in the world to deal with. Every time I've spoken to them on the phone, or we've had a conversation in person or on Skype, everything has been fantastic. But I didn't do that. I just blurted it out like a dipshit on the podcast, thinking that, hey, maybe they listen to this and maybe they'll just write me an email. I took no initiative. It came out of my fat face, and it has not come to fruition. So I'm actually going to send them an email this week. I'm going to ask them if it's possible. If it's not, we may find some way for Patreon to get involved and send somebody out there. If you're interested in going to the Film and Music Conference, let me know. Also, the tickets are $599, but you and all of your friends can save 10% if you use the coupon code WanderingDP when you are checking out. You can find more information on everything that we're going to be talking about here at filmandmusic.com. So we went over a few of the different speakers before we started the interview. Now we've got, the hardest name in the world. Come on. This is Minhal Baig. Is a Los Angeles-based writer and director recently featured on the 2016 Blacklist. Oh, well, she will have some things to talk about with Franklin Leonard, the founder of the Blacklist. Her feature-length script, Hala, produced by Will Smith's Overbook Entertainment. Currently, she is a staff writer on the Untitled Rami Youssef project, produced by Hulu and A24, a half-hour comedy about the creator's real-life experiences as a first-generation Egyptian-American Muslim. And then there's Twin Towers, Twin Towers, Aaron and Winston Tao are multi-award-winning filmmaking duo. Their short film Sleep Well, My Baby was awarded with a Webby honorable mention, a Vimeo staff pick, and was distributed as the 4th installment of the Film Supply Presents series. Their branded film, Super Marco, won them a Webby Award for People's Voice, as well as nominations for Best Emerging Directors, Best Narrative at the One Screen Film Festival. So a couple of young people that are coming up making some crazy cool shit. You probably want to do the same thing, so who better to talk to than people that are actually in the trenches doing it? And then we have a DP, Laura Gonzalez. Laura brings her style and essence to every stunning project she's a part of, and it's completely unmistakable. She shot commercials for brands like Canon, Guinness, Microsoft, and Michelob, as well as music videos for Bjork and Sigur Rós and several award-winning films. So she's going to be there talking cinematography, talking lighting, cameras, all of that good stuff. And then we've got Dallas Taylor, who, after cutting his teeth as a sound designer, mixer for networks like NBC, Fox, G4, Discovery, Dallas launched De Facto Sound, where he's led thousands of high-profile projects. Profile projects ranging from blockbuster game trailers like Fallout 4 to Sundance-winning films and advertising campaigns with lots of cool people that you've already heard of before. So there are more people coming to the lineup. This is an event not to be missed. You can find out more at filmandmusic.com and the coupon code WanderingDP. Oh, hot damn. We have come to the end of the episode, and never fear if this wasn't your cup of tea today. Do not fear, and I'm not talking about Eric, I'm talking about me speaking. Maybe perhaps you didn't like it. Perhaps you felt that it wasn't up to standard, but I think we did pretty good. And next week on the show, we have another guest, another interview from our Los Angeles trip. This is Todd Bonhazel, and I overemphasize the last name. Todd has got some amazing shit on his website. He's done some amazing projects. You can check it out. The link will be in the show notes page. You can get a little tease of what's to come next week. We're going to be talking a whole bunch of different stuff. He's just got a music video come out for Muse, and really looking forward to it. It was a fun chat, and I think you're going to be excited about the prospect of hearing all he's got to offer. So that's next week on the podcast. If you're a Patreon supporter, make sure you check out the live stream this Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific time, and also check out the YouTube page. Go over there. Go on. All the kids are doing it. Go check out YouTube and see the little Patreon series, cinematography series, episode 1 and 2, which should be up by next week. Okay, that is going to do it for this week on the show. Many thanks, and we will see you in the next episode next week. Same time, same place. Okay, that's it. Bye.
You've been listening to the Wandering DP podcast. For more information on the topics discussed in this episode and for show notes, visit www.wanderingdp.com. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to rate, like, and subscribe on iTunes.